Her perfect husband was a cold-blooded criminal. Chapter E. The Gilded Cage. The world hailed Elias Voss as the city's golden husband, rich, famous, untouchable. No one knew his wife Clara had spent 4 years trapped in a gilded cage. Tonight, on their 4th wedding anniversary, she finally saw the truth behind his perfect smile. Coldness. Madness. Blood on his hidden hands. While the whole city envied their fairy tale marriage, Elias was burying crimes, covering up murders, and locking his wife in a silent hell. But tonight, the obedient wife breaks. The perfect husband's worst enemy has woken up his own spouse. The city of New York breathed for Elias Voss. At 36, he was the face of Upper Manhattan wealth, billionaire, real estate tycoon, celebrated philanthropist, media's favorite golden boy. Magazine covers framed his sharp jawline and icy blue eyes. Charity galores hung on his every word. Strangers whispered that Clara Voss was the luckiest woman alive. No one knew she was a prisoner. Clara stood barefoot against the floor-to-ceiling windows of their penthouse, the November night air seeping through the glass, staring out at the glittering skyline of Manhattan. Below her, thousands of lights burned bright, symbols of the empire her husband had built and the cage he'd locked her inside. 4 years. 4 years of a marriage the whole world envied. 4 years of smiling for cameras, of pretending she adored the man who watched her like a possession, not a wife. Her black silk dress slipped off one shoulder. She did not bother fixing it. The penthouse was silent except for the distant hum of city traffic and the tick of a gold-plated clock on the marble fireplace. Elias would be home soon. Their 4th wedding anniversary gala had ended hours ago. He stayed behind to shake hands with politicians and billionaires, to polish his perfect public mask. To outsiders, they were flawless. To Clara, they were dying. She heard the elevator chime. Her spine went rigid. The penthouse doors slid open. Elias stepped in, tailored white dress shirt unbuttoned at the neck, faint red lipstick marks still smudged across his collarbone, leftovers from the gala's fawning socialites. His dark brown hair was styled perfectly, stubble sharp along his jaw, those cold blue eyes scanning the room until they landed on her. He did not smile. He never smiled for her anymore, not behind closed doors. "Stand away from the window, Clara," he said, voice low and smooth, the same voice that charmed crowds of thousands. "You'll catch a cold." She did not move. "Do you care if I do?" Elias crossed the room in 3 long strides, leather shoes clicking against polished marble. He stopped inches from her, his body radiating wealth and control, the scent of expensive cologne overwhelming her senses. He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek, not gentle, but possessive, like checking a piece of property. "Of course I care," he purred. "My wife must remain perfect. For the public." Clara flinched away from his touch. That was the truth of 4 years of marriage. He loved the idea of her, the pretty, obedient wife who made him look human, far more than he loved the real woman behind the mask. He was cold, obsessive, suffocating. Every small freedom she tried to grasp was ripped away. No private phone calls. No unapproved friends. No nights out without his security detail watching every move. Tonight, she finally understood why. 2 hours earlier, hidden in the back hallway of the gala venue, she'd overheard a conversation between Elias and his right-hand man, a brutal ex-cop named Hale. She ducked behind a marble pillar, her blood turning to ice as she listened. "The real estate project in Queens," Hale had grumbled. "The contractor found the bodies buried under the construction site last week. 2 missing laborers. They saw too much about the illegal land deals." Elias's voice had been flat, unfeeling, deadly calm. "Dispose of them. No loose ends. No witnesses. And remind the contractor what happens when he questions me." Then Hale had said something worse. Something that shattered every last illusion Clara had clung to for 4 years. "What about the wife of the man who exposed your offshore accounts last year? She's still asking police questions about his suicide. Silence her, Elias had ordered, without hesitation. Just like the rest. Murder. Illegal land grabs. Bribe cops. Cover-ups for countless crimes. The celebrated golden husband of New York was a monster hiding behind tailored suits and charity donations. And she'd slept next to him every single night for 4 years. Elias's gaze narrowed now, sensing her fear, her shift in energy. "What's wrong with you tonight?" he asked, tilting his head. "You're quiet. Too quiet." Clara lifted her chin, meeting his cold eyes head-on. For the first time in 4 years, she did not look away. "Nothing," she lied. "Just tired from the gala." He studied her, suspicious, his fingers tightening slightly around her jaw. "Remember your place, Clara. You are Mrs. Elias Voss. Everything you have, this penthouse, this life, your safety, it all belongs to me. Do not forget that." She beat back the scream building in her throat. She would not forget it. Not anymore. Tonight, the obedient wife died. Tonight, his enemy was born. Chapter 2: Secrets Buried in Gold. Elias did not stay long after that exchange. He poured himself a glass of expensive bourbon, walked to the window beside her, and stared out at his city, his victim's city, without another word. The silence between them was thick, sharp, charged with unspoken hatred. Clara's mind raced. 4 years. She'd known he was controlling, cruel, obsessed with power and control over every part of her life. She thought he was just a spoiled, ruthless billionaire, typical of New York's elite. She'd never guessed he was a killer. A man who buried bodies under his construction sites, who silenced whistleblowers with permanent violence, who bought off police and politicians to hide a mountain of illegal deeds. She'd married him at 24, young, naive, dazzled by his wealth and charm, by the promise of a perfect life. Her family had pushed her toward him, a catch. They called him security for life. She believed the fairy tale. She ignored the small red flags at first. His jealousy, his need to know every detail of her day, his coldness when they were alone. She thought it was passion. She thought it was love. It had always been ownership. When Elias finished his drink, he set the glass down with a sharp clink. "I have work to finish tonight," he said, turning to leave the living room for his private study, a locked room Clara had never been allowed to enter. "Stay here. Do not leave the penthouse. Do not call anyone." It was not a request. It was an order. He walked away, his broad shoulders rigid, his presence fading down the hallway. The study door clicked shut behind him, locking with a heavy bolt. Clara waited exactly 10 minutes. 10 minutes of staring at the city below, of forcing her hands to stop shaking, of forcing herself to stop panicking. Panic would get her killed. Fear would make her his next victim. She needed to be smart. She needed to be ruthless, just like him. She stood, silent as a shadow, and crossed the penthouse floor to the study door. It was locked, as always. But 4 years of living under his thumb had taught her his habits. He always left a spare key hidden in the hollow of a decorative bronze statue beside the door, a stupid, arrogant habit, proof he never believed his perfect wife would dare betray him. Clara's fingers trembled as she reached inside the statue and pulled out the cold metal key. She inserted it into the lock, twisted it slowly, so the bolt would not click loud enough for him to hear from inside. The door creaked open a fraction. Elias was hunched over his desk, his back to her, typing furiously on his laptop, surrounded by stacks of sealed envelopes, legal papers, thick manila folders. His study was a fortress of evidence: bank statements for illegal offshore accounts, photos of construction sites, police reports he bribed officials to bury, handwritten notes listing names of people he'd silenced, killed, threatened. Clara slipped inside, closing the door softly behind her. She stood in the shadows for a long moment, watching him work, watching the monster she married unmasked in his private space. His coldness was not an act here. It was his true face. No cameras, no crowds, no perfect husband masked, just a man consumed by greed and violence. Her eyes scanned the desk, the shelves, the locked safe in the corner. There it was. A thick black folder on the right side of his desk, labeled in Elias's sharp handwriting, "Loose ends permanent." She held her breath, stepping closer, her bare feet silent on the carpet. Elias was too focused on his screen to notice her movement. She reached out, her fingers brushing the edge of the folder, flipping it open slightly. Photos stared back at her. Blurry crime scene shots. Missing person flyers. Police reports marked closed case suicide accident. Names scrawled in red ink. Laborers, business partners, ex-employees, people who tried to expose him. Bodies buried under luxury high-rises. Lives erased for money. Families destroyed for his empire. Her stomach churned. She had been living with a serial killer for 4 years. She pulled out her phone, keeping it on silent, and started taking photos. Page after page, photo after photo, every piece of evidence she could grab before he noticed her presence. Offshore bank logs, brags to NYPD officers, blackmail files on city council members, records of illegal construction permits, proof of money laundering, proof of murder after murder. She had to get this out. She had to expose him. She had to make the world see the monster behind the golden boy mask. "What are you doing?" The voice was low, deadly, ice cold. Clara froze. Elias had turned around. His blue eyes were blazing with rage, no trace of the charming billionaire left. His jaw was tight, his hands curled into fists, and he stared at her phone, at the open folder in front of her. And Clara knew in that single second that she had crossed a line there was no coming back from. She was no longer his wife. She was his enemy. Chapter 3: The Trap and the Threat. Time slowed to a crawl. Clara's phone slipped slightly in her hand. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it would burst through her chest. She stood frozen in the middle of his study, surrounded by proof of his countless crimes. Caught red-handed by the man who killed people for far less betrayal than this. Elias stood slowly from his desk, his movements predatory, calculated, dangerous. He did not yell. He did not shout. That was the worst part. His rage was quiet, controlled, the rage of a man used to getting exactly what he wanted, used to destroying anyone who dared stand in his way. "You went through my things," he said, each word sharp as a blade. "You snuck into my study. You read my files. You took photos." It was not a question. It was a dead sentence. Clara forced herself to lift her chin, to stare him down, even as fear clawed at her throat. "All those people," she said, her voice shaking but steady. "The laborers buried under your buildings. The whistleblowers you killed. The cops you bought. You're a monster, Elias. Not the perfect husband the world worships. You're a killer." A cold, cruel smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. He took one step toward her, then another, closing the distance between them until they were only feet apart. She could see the darkness in his eyes, the obsessive madness she'd caught glimpses of behind closed doors over 4 years, fully unleashed now. "And you just found out tonight," he sneered. 4 years of marriage, and you finally open your eyes. How sweet. How could you? Clara whispered, the weight of 4 years of lies crashing down on her. How could you pretend to love me, to build a life with me, while you're burying bodies under our city? Law. Elias laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "I never loved you, Clara. I never loved anyone. You were a prop. A pretty face to make the public trust me. A perfect wife to hide the blood on my hands. That's all you ever were." His words cut deeper than any knife. 4 years of her life wasted, given to a man who never saw her as human, only a decoration for his perfect public image. He reached out suddenly, snatching her phone from her hand before she could react. His fingers wrapped around her wrist hard enough to bruise, pulling her toward him. She struggled, kicking, trying to pull away, but he was stronger, bigger, fueled by rage and control. He scrolled through her photos, his face hardening more and more with every slide. "You have evidence," he said, flat and deadly. "Enough to send me to prison for life. Enough to ruin every part of my empire. I'll send it to the police," Clara spat, fighting against his grip. "To every news outlet in New York. I'll expose every single thing you've done. You'll lose everything." Elias slammed her back against the wall of his study, pinning her wrists above her head with one hand, his body pressed against hers, trapping her completely. His face was inches from hers, his breath hot against her skin, his eyes wild with obsession and anger. "You will do no such thing," he growled. "You think you can win against me? You think the police will believe the wife of New York's golden boy over me? I own half the NYPD. I own half the city council. I own the media. No one will touch me." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "And if you try to expose me, Clara, I will destroy you. I will ruin your family. I will hurt every person you ever cared about. And when I'm done with them, I will kill you, slow and painful. No one will ever find your body. Just like all the others." Clara's blood ran cold. She knew he meant it. Every single word. He did not make empty threats. He buried people for crossing him. She was now the biggest threat he'd ever faced, and he would eliminate her without hesitation. He released one of her wrists, keeping the other pinned, and deleted every single photo she'd taken from her phone. He tossed the phone across the room, where it skittered against the marble floor, screen cracking. "Those are gone," he said. "No proof. I sent copies to a secure cloud," Clara lied, a desperate bluff, buying herself time. "Even if you delete my phone photos, they're saved. I set it up before I came in here. If anything happens to me, they get sent to every journalist in the country." It was a lie. She had no time to upload anything. But Elias's jaw tightened, his grip loosening. For a split second he believed her. Fear flickered across his cold face, the first crack in his perfect control she'd ever seen. That small crack gave her hope. He stepped back, releasing her completely, his gaze never leaving hers. "You're playing a dangerous game, wife," he warned. "I will watch your every move from now on. No calls. No texts. No leaving this penthouse without Hale and my security team breathing down your neck. You are my prisoner, now more than ever." He pointed to the bedroom door. "Go to our room. Lock yourself in. Think about what you've done. Think about the consequences of betraying me." Clara did not move at first, staring at the man she'd married, the monster she'd uncovered, the enemy she now had to defeat. Then she slowly turned, walking out of his study, her back straight, refusing to show him how terrified she truly was. Behind her, Elias slammed his fist against his desk, papers flying everywhere, his rage finally breaking free. Clara walked down the hallway to their shared bedroom, closed the door, and locked it behind her. She slid down against the wood, her back pressed to the door, and let the fear crash over her in waves. But she did not cry. She thought of the people Elias had killed, of the families he'd destroyed, of 4 years of her own life wasted in a gilded cage of lies. She would not back down. She would outsmart him. She would take down the perfect billionaire husband, no matter what it cost her. Chapter 4: The Wife's Counterattack. The bedroom was large, luxurious, a prison of silk sheets and gold accents and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Clara had slept here every night for 4 years, wrapped in the sheets of a killer, blind to the truth of who he really was. Now every corner felt suffocating, every shadow hiding danger. She sat on the edge of the king-size bed for hours, long after midnight, her mind spinning, planning her next move. Elias's threats echoed in her head: destroy her family, kill her, bury her like his other victims. He meant every word. She could not trust anyone she knew. Her family loved Elias, blinded by his wealth and status. They would never believe her accusations against him. Her old friends had all been pushed away by Elias over the years, forbidden from contacting her. She was alone. But she was not powerless. 4 years of being married to Elias Voss had given her a weapon no one else had: intimate knowledge of him. His habits, his weaknesses, his fears, his enemies. He thought she was a pretty, obedient wife with no brains. He underestimated her completely. That was his fatal mistake. She had one advantage he did not: she knew the secrets he thought no one would ever uncover. First, she needed proof, real proof, not just photos she could take and lose. She needed physical evidence, witness statements, people who could testify against him. She needed to outsmart his security, his bribe police contacts, his iron grip on New York's elite. She thought back to the gala conversation she overheard. 2 construction laborers buried under his Queens real estate set. A dead whistleblower ruled as suicide. Bribe cops. Illegal land deals. Money laundering. Murder. She needed to find the people Elias had missed, people scared enough to talk, people hurt enough by his crimes to risk crossing him. She thought of Hale, Elias's brutal right-hand man. Hale had done most of the dirty work for Elias over the years. He was the one who disposed of bodies, silenced witnesses, threatened victims. But Hale was not loyal out of love, he was loyal out of fear and money. What if he was scared enough to flip? What if he hated Elias more than he served him? Or maybe there was someone else. A construction worker who knew about the buried bodies. A police officer with a conscience, tired of taking Elias's bribes. A family member of one of his victims, grieving and angry, ready to fight back. She needed to get out of the penthouse first. Elias had locked her down, assigned security guards to watch her every move, cut off all her communication with the outside world. She could not sneak out the front door. She could not use her phone, he'd taken it, locked it away, monitoring every device in the penthouse. But she knew the penthouse better than anyone. At 3 in the morning, when the penthouse was silent, when Elias was passed out drunk in his study or sleeping off his rage, Clara stood up from the bed. She changed into dark black jeans, a plain black hoodie, black sneakers, clothes that would let her blend into the night, far from her usual silk dress socialite look. She walked to the back of the master bedroom, to a small service balcony Elias never used, hidden behind heavy curtains. A narrow metal fire escape ladder leading down the side of the building to the alley below. He'd forgotten about this exit, just like he'd forgotten about so many small details that could bring him down. Arrogance was his biggest flaw. She pulled back the curtains, unlocked the small balcony door silently, and stepped out into the cold November night air. The wind whipped her hair around her face, the city lights stretching out below her. She gripped the metal ladder tightly, her hands cold against the rough metal, and climbed down, 1 rung at a time, heart hammering. 30 stories down. 1 wrong move, and she fell to her death. 1 sound, and Elias's security would find her. She made it to the alley at the bottom of the building, hidden by shadow and garbage bins, out of sight of the penthouse windows. She slipped out of the alley onto the dark city streets, pulling her hood up over her head, disappearing into the night of Manhattan. Her first stop, the Queens construction site Elias had built his latest luxury high-rise, on where 2 laborers were buried under concrete. She took a late-night subway, riding in the near-empty car, keeping her head down. The subway rattled through the dark tunnels of New York, its wheels screeching against the tracks like a warning. Clara kept her hood pulled low, her gaze fixed on the scuffed floor of the nearly empty car, her entire body cold with taut, unrelenting tension. The few scattered passengers paid her no mind, just another anonymous soul adrift in the city's midnight haze. Nothing like the polished, famous Mrs. Elias Voss who graced charity event headlines. No one would recognize her now, stripped of silk gowns, diamond jewelry, and the docile, smiling mask she'd worn for 4 suffocating years. Her hands still trembled faintly from the confrontation in Elias's study. The echo of his cold threats lingered in her ears. I'll destroy your family. I'll kill you slow and painful. No one will ever find your body. Every word was etched into her mind, sharp and unforgiving, but fear no longer paralyzed her. It had hardened into something colder, fiercer, resolve. She had spent too long as a captive, a prop, a ghost in her own marriage. Tonight, she fought back. The train's automated voice droned the next stop, Queen's Plaza. Clara stood the second the doors slid open, stepping out into the bitter November night. The air here was thicker, grittier than the polished, sterile breeze of Manhattan tinged with concrete dust, damp asphalt, and the distant hum of industrial machinery. Manhattan sparkled like a jewel across the river, a glittering reminder of Elias's empire, while this corner of Queens lay buried in shadow, unpolished and forgotten. It was the perfect hiding place for buried bodies and buried secrets. She memorized the location of the construction site from the files she'd glimpsed in Elias's study. The address burned into her memory amid the chaos of stolen photos and mortal fear. It was a 20-minute walk from the station, through dimly lit side streets lined with boarded-up storefronts, chain-link fences, and vacant lots. Streetlights flickered overhead, casting jagged shadows that stretched long across the pavement, and every distant footstep made her flinch, half convinced Elias's security had already tracked her down. Elias would have discovered her escape by now. There was no doubt in her mind. He would have checked the bedroom, found the fire escape ajar, and unleashed his entire security team to hunt her down. Hale would be leading the search cold, ruthless, unburdened by mercy, the man who'd cleaned up every one of Elias's messes for years. They would scan every street, every subway line, every alley in Manhattan first. Too arrogant to believe his obedient, sheltered wife would dare venture into the rough outskirts of Queens. That arrogance was her only advantage. When she finally rounded the corner onto the construction site street, her breath caught in her throat. A towering luxury high-rise skeleton jetted into the night sky, half-built and menacing, cranes looming overhead like silent sentinels. The site was surrounded by tall metal fencing topped with razor wire, locked gates chained shut, and dim floodlights that bleached the concrete in harsh white light. A faded construction banner hung crookedly on the fence, Voss Development Future Luxury Residences. Luxury, Clara thought bitterly, built on the bones of dead men. The site was supposed to be abandoned at this hour, no night shifts scheduled, no workers present. But as she lingered in the shadow of a neighboring warehouse, she spotted a long black SUV parked near the service gate, its engine idling low. Tinted windows hid the occupants, but she knew exactly who it belonged to. Hale. Elias had sent him to guard the site, to erase any trace of the 2 laborers buried beneath the foundation before the truth could surface. Her pulse spiked. This was riskier than she'd imagined. She'd come here hoping to find loose evidence, a stray worker, a forgotten record. Instead, she walked straight into the path of Elias's most dangerous enforcer. Clara pressed her back flat against the cold brick wall of the warehouse, forcing herself to breathe slowly and steadily. Panic was a death sentence here. She watched the SUV intently, memorizing every small movement. After 5 minutes, the driver's side door opened, and Hale stepped out. He was broad, bulky, with a shaved head and a scar slicing through his left eyebrow, his frame rigid with the quiet aggression of a former cop-turned-criminal henchman. He wore all black, a handgun holstered visibly at his hip, his gaze sweeping the empty street in a sharp, systematic patrol. He was searching for threads, for witnesses, for loose ends, for her. Hale muttered a low curse under his breath, pulling out a phone and tapping at the screen furiously. Clara's chest tightened. He was reporting to Elias, telling him the site was secure, scanning for intruders, updating his boss on the hunt for the runaway wife. She had two choices: run, hide, flee back to Manhattan and spend the rest of her life trapped in Elias's gilded prison, waiting for him to break her completely. Or stay, sneak in, and find the proof that could take down everything he built. She chose the latter. Her eyes traced the perimeter fence, searching for a gap, a weak spot, any opening Hale had overlooked. The main gates were heavily locked and guarded, but further down the fence line, a section of metal paneling had been bent inward, the rusted bolts loose and broken, likely damaged by construction equipment weeks prior, forgotten in the rush to cover up the murders. It was narrow, just wide enough for a person to slip through. Waiting until Hale turned his back to march toward the main gate, Clara darted forward, silent as smoke. She squeezed through the broken fence panel, the sharp metal edges scraping against her hoodie, tearing the fabric and grazing her forearm. A faint stain of blood pricked her skin, but she ignored it, slipping into the shadow of the half-built foundation before Hale could turn around. The construction site smelled of wet concrete, rusted metal, and damp earth. Piles of steel rebar, wooden planks, and cement bags littered the ground. Deep excavations gaped open in the center of the log foundation pits where the basement levels of the luxury tower would soon be poured. This was where the bodies lay, she knew. Buried beneath tons of fresh concrete, hidden forever beneath Elias's glossy, expensive real estate dream. She moved low to the ground, staying in the dark gaps between construction piles, her eyes scanning every inch of the site for evidence. Elias's files had confirmed the two laborers were migrant workers, unregistered, with no close family to report their disappearances, perfect victims for a man who built empires on silence. They stumbled on his illegal land deed falsifications, on his under-the-table deals with city inspectors, and they paid for it with their lives. As she circled the foundation pit, her shoe kicked against something hard and plastic half buried in loose dirt. Clara knelt down, brushing away the cold sole with trembling fingers. It was a worker's ID badge. Faded, crumpled, covered in grime. The photo showed a young man with a tired smile and dark eyes, the name printed in smudged black ink, Miguel Santos. Her throat tightened. This was one of the two men Elias had killed. A real person, with a name, a face, a life erased for no crime other than seeing too much. She tucked the badge into her hoodie pocket, her fingers closing tightly around it like a talisman. This was physical proof. Not just deleted photos, not just a bluff about cloud backups. This was tangible evidence that someone had died here, that Elias's perfect empire was built on murder. She kept searching, digging gently through the loose dirt near the foundation edge, and minutes later, she found another relic. A cracked cell phone, half buried under a cement chunk. The screen was shattered, the casing caked in mud, but when she pressed the power button, it flickered faintly to life. It was waterlogged and damaged, but not completely dead. Hope flared bright in her chest. If she could get this phone repaired, extract its data, it might hold photos, messages, proof of the illegal land deals. Proof that Miguel and his coworker had been silenced for discovering the truth. Clara slipped the phone into her other pocket, straightening to leave when a low, cold voice cut through the night air. I knew you'd come here. Her blood turned to ice. Hale stood 10 feet behind her, his frame blocking the faint floodlight glow, his face half-shadowed, half-lit, a cold smirk playing on his lips. His hand rested casually on the handgun at his hip, fingers curled tight around the grip. He hadn't been patrolling. He'd been waiting. He'd seen her slip through the fence. He'd let her search, let her find the evidence, all to trap her. Clara froze, her mind racing for an escape, every muscle tense to run. Stay back, she said, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her gut. Hale let out a low, humorless laugh, taking one slow step forward, then another, closing the distance between them. You think you're clever, don't you? Sneaking out of the penthouse, running all the way to Queens to dig up your husband's dirt. You really thought we wouldn't track you? Elias doesn't know everything, she retorted, inching backward toward the foundation pit, her eyes darting for an exit route. Elias knows everything, Hale corrected sharply, his smirk fading into a cold, hard scowl. He knew you'd fake the clock backup bluff. Knew you'd run to the only crime scene you know about. Sent me here to wait for you. Said you'd come chasing proof. Said you'd be stupid enough to dig your own grave. Clara's heart sank. Elias had anticipated every move. He hadn't panicked at her lie, he calculated it, used it to lure her out of the penthouse, to catch her trespassing at a murder site, to give himself every excuse to lock her away permanently. She thought she was outsmarting him, but she'd been walking straight into his trap all along. Hand over the badge and the phone, Hale ordered, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. Now, or I'll take them from you. And you won't like how I do it. She tightened her hands around her pockets, clutching the evidence like it was her lifeline. These are proof of his murders. Proof you helped him bury innocent men. You're just as guilty as he is, Hale. For a split second, a flicker of something raw and angry crossed his face, resentment, fear, exhaustion. It was gone in an instant, masked by his cold enforcer facade, but Clara saw it. She'd been right earlier. Hale was not loyal. He was trapped. He was a man covered in Elias's blood, forced to clean up his messes or be buried alongside his victims. You don't know anything, he snapped, advancing faster now. I know you're scared, Clara pressed, her voice sharp and urgent, refusing to back down. You do all his dirty work. You bury the bodies, silence the witnesses, take all the risk. And what do you get for it? Money, for now. But when Elias is done with you, he'll bury you too. Just like he buried Miguel and the other laborer. Just like he buried the whistleblower who committed suicide last year. Hale's jaw tightened violently, his knuckles whitening around his gun. His eyes flashed with a rage that was not directed at her but at Elias. The crack in his loyalty was widening, and Clara seized it, pushing harder. He's using you, she said firmly. He always has been. You're his weapon. His scapegoat. The second you're no longer useful, you're loose ends. And loose ends get buried. Silence hung thick in the night air, broken only by the distant creak of construction metal and the rush of wind through the empty building frame. Hale stared at her, his expression unreadable, his body rigid with internal conflict. For a long moment, Clara thought he'd pull the gun, thought he'd follow Elias's orders without hesitation. But then he lowered his hand from his hip. What do you want? He muttered, his voice rough and defeated, the tough enforcer mask finally sleeping. Clara exhaled slowly, relief flooding her chest, though she did not let her guard down for a second. I want the truth. I want everything Elias has hidden. Every murder, every bribe, every illegal deal. I want enough evidence to take him down for good. Hale stared at the foundation pit, at the dark, gaping hole where two men lay buried under concrete, and let out a bitter laugh. You think taking him down is possible? He owns this city. Cops, judges, politicians, reporters, all of them in his pocket. I've seen him ruin families, destroy careers, kill people for smaller slights than what you're planning. You'll die trying. I'm already dying, Clara said quietly, honestly. I've been dying for 4 years trapped in that penthouse. I'd rather die fighting than spend another day as his puppet. Her words hung in the cold night air, heavy and unshakable. Hale studied her face, searching for fear, for doubt, for weakness but found none. He saw only a woman who had lost everything, who had nothing left to lose. Finally, he nodded once, sharp and decisive. I have files. Clara's breath caught. What files? Elias never keeps all his proof in one place, Hale explained, his voice low, urgent, no longer hostile. He's too careful. The study folders are just the surface. I keep a hidden archive, digital records, witness statements, transaction logs, video footage of every cleanup, every bribe, every murder he's ordered. I started it 2 years ago. For insurance. Clara's eyes widened. Insurance against Elias. He promised he'd never turn on me, Hale said, his tone cold with cynicism. But I've watched him kill loyal men for no reason. I knew one day he'd decide I know too much. So I saved everything. Every dirty deed, every illegal order, every name of the people we buried. It's enough to bury Elias Voss for life. Enough to take down his entire empire. This was the break she'd been fighting for. The key to finally unmasking the perfect golden husband and destroying his criminal reign. Where is it? She asked quickly. Encrypted cloud drive, hidden server, physical backup drives in a safe house in Brooklyn, Hale replied. No one knows about it but me. Not even Elias. Before Clara could respond, a sharp, ringing sound cut through the night. Hale's work phone. Elias's name flashed across the screen. Hale froze, staring at the caller ID, his jaw tightening. He hesitated for only a second before answering, pressing the phone to his ear and shifting back into his cold, professional enforcer tone instantly. Sir. Elias's voice poured through the speaker, low, icy, and lethal, so clear Clara could hear every syllable from where she stood. Is she there? Hale's gaze flicked to Clara, sharp and warning, a silent plea for her to stay quiet. Yes. Found her trespassing on site. Bring her home, Elias ordered, his voice devoid of any warmth, any trace of the husband he pretended to be. Immediately. And bring whatever evidence she's collected. No mistakes, Hale. No loose ends. The line went dead. Hale lowered the phone, his expression grave. He's on his way. He'll be here in 10 minutes with a full security team. If he finds you here, finds you talking to me, he'll kill you both. No exceptions. Clara's mind raced, calculating every possibility. Then we leave now. Together. You give me the archive, and we take him down. Hale shook his head sharply. I can't run. He'll hunt me down forever. He has my family's information, my records, everything. If I betray him, they die first. Clara's chest ached at the truth of it. Elias's cruelty knew no bounds. He didn't just kill his enemies, he destroyed everything they loved to break them first. Then give me the access, she said firmly. Give me the encryption key, the safe house address, everything I need. I'll take the risk. You stay in place, keep him fooled. Be his loyal enforcer until the second I take him down. Hale stared at her, weighing the choice, the weight of years of guilt and fear pressing down on him. For so long, he complied, obeyed, cleaned up Elias's messes to survive. But tonight, staring at the proof of 2 buried men at his feet, staring at a woman brave enough to fight a monster no one else dared to challenge, he made his choice. He pulled a small, encrypted USB drive from his pocket, holding it out to her. Everything is on this. Backed up, encrypted, untraceable. The cloud link, the safe house coordinates, every file, every video, every transaction. It's all here. Clara reached out, her fingers brushing his as she took the USB, tucking it securely into her inner pocket, safer than the broken phone and the ID badge. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Hale warned, his voice urgent. Elias will torture you for information if he catches you. He'll break you piece by piece to find out what you know, who you talk to. Run. Now. There's a subway stop 3 blocks west. Take it to Brooklyn. The safe house is coded into the drive. Lay low, decrypt the files, and don't trust anyone. What about you? Clara asked. I'll cover for you, he said flatly. Tell him I chased you but you escaped into the subway tunnels. He'll be furious, but he'll believe it. He still thinks I'm his loyal dog. The distant rumble of high-end car engines echoed down the street, growing louder by the second. Elias was here. Go! Hale snapped, urgency flaring in his eyes. Clara didn't hesitate. She turned and ran, sprinting across the dark construction site, leaping over loose concrete piles and steel rebar, her feet flying over the rough dirt ground. She squeezed back through the broken fence, ignoring the sharp metal scraping her sides, and darted into the shadowed side streets of Queens, her hood pulled tight over her head. Behind her, she heard the roar of car engines skidding to a halt, heard car doors slamming open, heard Elias's cold, furious voice cutting through the night air as he discovered her missing. Find her. The single command echoed like a death sentence through the dark streets. Clara ran faster, her lungs burning, her heart pounding so hard it drowned out every other sound. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Behind her lay the monster she'd married, the gilded cage she'd escaped, 4 years of lies and pain. Ahead of her lay the truth, the evidence, and the fight to finally bring Elias Voss to his knees. She raced toward the subway stop, the USB drive pressing warm and heavy against her chest, a tiny, powerful weapon against an empire of blood and lies. Tonight, the obedient wife was gone forever. Tonight, the hunter had become the hunted and she was finally ready to win. Elias's entire facade of calm, unshakable control shattered in that single heartbeat. The endless stream of buzzing notifications on his phone morphed from mere PR alerts to urgent calls from his legal team, his company board, and the corrupt city officials who had once sworn unwavering loyalty to his empire. Each vibration was a nail hammered into the coffin of the perfect life he had spent decades constructing. His icy blue eyes, once cold and calculating, now blazed with unbridled rage and frantic desperation, the mask of the benevolent billionaire completely stripped away to reveal the ruthless, bloodthirsty monster lurking beneath. He took a menacing step forward, his broad frame towering over Clara, his muscles coiled like a predator cornered by its prey. You think this is over? His voice dropped to a low, dangerous growl, thick with venom and menace, echoing sharply off the concrete basement walls. You think a few leaked files and amateur journalist reports are enough to destroy me? I have spent years burying every loose thread, buying every voice, controlling every narrative in this city. I can burn every news outlet, silence every reporter, and erase every trace of these files before sunrise. You have no idea what I am capable of, Clara. Clara did not flinch. She held his furious gaze unwaveringly, her back still pressed flat against the cold wall, every nerve in her body alight with adrenaline and newfound courage. For 4 years, she had cowered from this man, feared his temper, obeyed his every silent and spoken rule. She had believed he was untouchable, invincible, a god of Manhattan who could rewrite truth at his will. But tonight, she had broken his spell. She had exposed his lies, unearthed his bloodied secrets, and stripped him of the power he had wielded over her for far too long. You can't burn this down, she replied steadily, her voice clear and unshaken, no trace of fear lingering in her tone. These files aren't stored in one place. I sent them to anonymous international servers, independent journalists across 3 countries, legal watchdog groups, and federal investigative tip lines. Your bribed local officials, your paid-off PR teams, your manipulated city media, none of them have jurisdiction overseas. None of them can erase proof that's already been downloaded, saved, and shared by hundreds of unbiased sources. A flicker of genuine, unmasked terror crossed Elias's face, so brief most would have missed it, but Clara saw it clearly. It was the fear of a man who had never known defeat, who had always controlled every outcome, finally facing a consequence he could not bribe, threaten, or kill his way out of. He reached out suddenly, his long fingers snapping forward to clamp tightly around her wrist, his grip bruising and unyielding. Pain flared up her arm, but she refused to wince, refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her weakness. Then I'll erase you, he snarled, yanking her forward until their faces were inches apart, his cold breath fanning over her cheeks. Dead women tell no stories. If my reputation is going to burn anyway, I have nothing left to lose. I'll kill you right here, bury your body beneath this forgotten basement, and rebuild everything I've lost. I've done it before. I'll do it again. Clara stared deep into his frenzied eyes, seeing the desperation lurking behind his anger, the cracks spreading wider in his crumbling composure. She tilted her chin higher, a faint, defiant gleam in her own gaze. You won't. Because every single file I send includes timestamped proof of your surveillance, your illegal tracking, your attempts to kidnap and silence me tonight. Every second you spent chasing me, every threat you made, every crime you committed to cover up your murders is documented. Kill me, and you don't just lose your empire, you lock yourself away for life. No more money, no more power, no more perfect facade. Only a prison cell for the rest of your days. Elias's grip faltered, his fingers loosening slightly around her wrist. For a long, taut moment, the only sounds in the cramped basement were their ragged breathing and the constant, insistent buzzing of his phone, each alert a reminder that his world was collapsing faster than he could salvage it. He had always calculated every risk, every move, every variable, but he had never calculated for her. He had underestimated the quiet, obedient wife he'd caged for years, dismissing her as fragile, naive, and easily broken. He had never imagined she would outthink him, outmaneuver him, and weaponize his own cruelty against him. You changed, he muttered, his voice lower, colder, almost disbelieving, as if he was seeing her for the very first time. I always thought you were soft. Weak. Grateful for the life I gave you. I was never weak, Clara shot back, pulling her wrist free from his loosened hold, her movements sharp and deliberate. I was just blind. Blind to the monster I married, blind to the blood on your hands, blind to the fact that every luxury you gave me was paid for with someone else's life. I'm not grateful for a gilded prison, Elias. I'm grateful I finally woke up before you buried me too. As if on cue, the distant wail of police sirens cut through the quiet Brooklyn night, growing louder and closer by the second. The sound made Elias's jaw lock, his entire body tensing with lethal tension. The sirens were not his bribed NYPD officers coming to arrest Clara. They were federal sirens, sharp, unyielding, untouchable by his local influence. Clara had planned for this too. She had included federal anti-corruption task forces in her mass file dispatch, knowing that local police and city investigators were all buried deep in Elias's pockets. She had bypassed every corrupted layer of New York's justice system entirely, taking his crimes straight to the federal level, where his money and power held no sway. The second those damning files hit federal inboxes, an active investigation had been launched instantly. You called the feds? Elias hissed, pure hatred simmering in his eyes, his voice laced with unbridled fury. I called justice, Clara corrected firmly. The justice you spent decades evading. The justice Miguel and Javier deserved. The justice every person you ruined, every life you erased deserved. The sirens pulled up directly outside the abandoned laundromat, tires screeching against the asphalt. Bright flashing red and blue lights flooded through the cracks beneath the basement door, painting the dark concrete walls in stark, flickering color. Heavy footsteps thundered above their heads, loud and authoritative, followed by the distinct click of tactical gear and muted radio chatter. Federal agents had surrounded the entire building, cutting off every possible escape route. Panic finally consumed Elias's rage. He spun toward the cellar door, his mind racing to find an exit, a way to run, a last-minute save. But there was nowhere to go. The basement was a trap he had walked straight into, a cage far smaller and far more final than the penthouse he'd locked Clara inside for 4 years. He was the one trapped now. This isn't over, he beat out, his voice rough and desperate, his perfect composure completely shattered. I have lawyers. I have connections. I can post bail, appeal, delay. I can. You can't delay the truth, Clara interrupted calmly, watching him unravel with quiet resolve. The evidence is irrefutable. Video footage, audio recordings, bank transaction logs, witness testimonies, recovered victim data. Every single crime you committed is documented beyond repair. Your connections will abandon you the second they realize your empire can't protect them anymore. Your lawyers will turn on you to save their own careers. Your money won't buy you freedom this time. Elias fell silent, his chest heaving with ragged, furious breaths. He stared at her, his once piercing blue eyes now dark and hollow, stripped of all arrogance and power. In that moment, he was no longer the untouchable billionaire tycoon of New York's high society. He was just a desperate killer, cornered and defeated, staring at the only person brave enough to take him down. A loud, authoritative bang echoed from above as federal agents breached the rear entrance of the laundromat. FBI. Open the door. This is a federal raid. Elias's shoulders slumped slightly, the last of his fight draining from his body. He knew better than to resist federal agents. Any further violence would only add more charges to the mountain already stacked against him: murder, conspiracy, corruption, money laundering, obstruction of justice, and unlawful imprisonment, to name only a few. The cellar door was thrown open violently, bright floodlight beams cutting through the basement darkness. Multiple armed federal agents flooded the small space in seconds, tactical rifles raised, voices sharp and commanding. They zeroed in instantly on Elias Voss, recognizing the disgraced billionaire from the case files they'd been sent to investigate. Elias Voss, you are under arrest for multiple counts of felony corruption, conspiracy to commit murder, and financial fraud, the lead agent announced firmly, stepping forward with handcuffs in hand. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Two agents moved forward to secure him, grabbing his arms firmly to lock the cuffs into place. Elias did not struggle. He did not fight. He did not speak. He only turned his head slowly, his cold, defeated gaze locking back on Clara as he was restrained and guided toward the door. There was no longer anger in his eyes, no longer hatred, only a bitter, hollow regret, too little and far too late. As they led him out of the basement, into the blinding night lights and waiting police vehicles, the first wave of breaking news alerts exploded across every screen in New York City. Headlines blared relentlessly across televisions, social media platforms, and news websites. Billionaire Elias was arrested on federal murder and corruption charges. Voss development empire collapses after decades of hidden crimes exposed. Socialite Clara Voss uncovers husband's bloody criminal legacy. The perfect husband, the perfect billionaire, the untouchable king of Manhattan, his reign was over. Clara stood alone in the empty basement for a long time after the agents left, the silence slowly settling over the space. Her shoulders finally relaxed, the years of tension, fear, and suppression melting away from her frame. She lifted a hand to her forearm, brushing lightly over the faint scar left by the broken fence, a permanent reminder of the night she chose to fight instead of flee. She picked up Miguel Santos's worker ID from the desk, holding it gently in her palm, her gaze softening with quiet relief. They finally had justice. The two forgotten laborers, buried beneath Elias's greedy empire, were no longer nameless, faceless victims. Their truth was public, their deaths avenged, their lives remembered. She slipped the ID and the recovered cell phone into her pocket, alongside the encrypted USB drive that had started it all. Every piece of evidence was safe, every secret exposed, every crime accounted for. She walked slowly toward the open cellar door, stepping out into the cool Brooklyn night air, the fresh wind brushing against her face, free and unburdened for the first time in 4 years. Outside, A crowd of distant onlookers had begun to gather, murmuring in shock as they watched federal agents haul the disgraced billionaire into a waiting police vehicle. Camera flashes flickered in the distance, capturing the final fall of New York's most celebrated Golden Ball. The city that had once worshipped Elias Voss was now watching his ruin unfold in real time. A federal investigator approached Clara a moment later, his tone calm and respectful, no longer viewing her as a delusional socialite or a fugitive, but as the key witness who had taken down one of the largest criminal empires in New York's history. Ms. Voss, we'd like to take your official statement and secure the physical evidence you collected. Your testimony will be critical to securing a lifetime conviction for Elias Voss and all his accomplices. Clara nodded quietly, her gaze fixed on the police car holding the man who had destroyed so many lives. I'll tell you everything, she said. Every single thing he hid. Every crime he committed. Every person he hurt. In the weeks that followed, the entire city of New York unraveled from the fallout of Elias Voss's arrest. His development company collapsed overnight, its projects frozen, its assets seized by the federal government. The corrupt officials, bribed inspectors, and paid-off police officers who had protected his crimes were all rounded up one by one, their names exposed publicly, their careers and reputations destroyed. Hale, who had cooperated with federal investigators and testified against Elias in exchange for immunity, for his reluctant involvement in the cover-ups, provided further damning evidence that sealed the case permanently. The public narrative shifted completely. The world no longer saw Clara as a bitter, unstable wife. They saw her as a survivor, a brave woman who had escaped a violent, manipulative marriage, uncovered unspeakable evil, and fought relentlessly for justice against impossible odds. The media that had once smeared her name now praised her courage, publishing in-depth stories of Elias's cruelty and the years of manipulation and isolation he had inflicted on his wife. Clara's family, who had once been manipulated by Elias's lies and doubted her accusations, reached out to her with endless apologies and support. They finally understood the hell she had endured in the gilded penthouse that had once seemed like a dream life. Months later, after a lengthy, high-profile trial, Elias Voss was convicted on all charges, multiple counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy, grand corruption, money laundering, and unlawful confinement. The judge sentenced him to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. The perfect empire he had built on blood and lies was gone forever, reduced to nothing but headlines and a cautionary tale for the city of New York. On the day the verdict was announced, Clara stood alone outside the federal courthouse, staring up at the clear blue sky. She was no longer Clara Voss, the wife of a famous billionaire. She was simply Clara, free, unchained, and finally in control of her own life. The fear that had haunted her for 4 long years was gone. The trauma lingered, faint and quiet, but it no longer defined her. She had turned her pain into purpose, her fear into courage, and her captivity into freedom. She pulled Miguel Santos's worker ID out of her pocket one last time, holding it gently in her hand, a quiet tribute to the 2 men who had unwittingly sparked the downfall of a monster. For them, for every victim Elias had erased, for herself she had won. The gilded cage was broken. The cold-blooded criminal was finally behind bars. And at long last, Clara was home.